Welcome to the Jonathan Kinloch Show. I said I was going to talk at the end of this year about the presidential election, but I wanted to talk to individuals who were actually engaged and actually working, some of the folks who were actually working in the community to make sure that President Obama was re-elected. And as well as I said, at the end of the year, I want to have a conversation about what next year should look like as we move into the mayoral election, city council elections, and also what we need to see or get from future leaders. Here on the Jonathan Kinloch Show today, we have two leaders in the city of Detroit, two young and dynamic leaders that I'm going to have a conversation with, and that is State Representative John Olumba, who, as you can recall, is leading an effort to recall the mayor of the city of Detroit. He also has taken on a number of unpopular issues on behalf of the citizens of both Detroit and Wayne County. And Kevin Tolbert, who is the assistant director at the UAW, who was very active in coordinating the re-election of President Obama here in Detroit and southeastern Michigan. Two dynamic leaders on the other side of this break here on the Jonathan Kinloch Show. Welcome back to the Jonathan Kinloch Show. State Representative John Olumba was recently re-elected. He was elected and he won the election out of a very tough and competitive race. A lot of the establishment endorsed his opponent, but he received the support of the voters in his district. And we've had a conversation with him a few weeks back, and we decided to bring him in as much as he was one of the two young individuals who was very visible and actively trying to make sure that President Obama won re-election. Welcome back to the show.
Oh yeah, thank you for having me.
Representative Olumba, the election has just ended. President Obama was re-elected. We also had some other offices that were on the ballot. Specifically, we had the Supreme Court, we had those ballot initiatives, as well as we had some other proposals that were on the ballot locally. President Obama won re-election, but down the ticket there were some disappointing results. And what is your take as relates to the impact of this election on the next legislature?
Right. One of the things was that we were focused on from the state house, from the perspective of the state house, was at least wanting to win back the state house for the next 2 years. If you remember correctly, 2 years ago we had the governor's race, and in that governor's race, the Republican Party swept the entire ticket. They won the Supreme Court, they won the governor's mansion, of course, they won the state house at a 63-47 margin, and they won the Senate House by supermajority. They also took the Attorney General with Bill Schuette in there, and they also took the Secretary of State. And so what we, in the interim election, which matches up with the presidential election this year, the two that were up for grabs, so to speak, that we thought that we would be able to gain back was the Supreme Court and the House of Representatives. Everyone else will be up in 2 more years because they saw 4-year terms. What happened on the end of it was that we were able to make sure that the president won the state of Michigan, and he did so in a I think, a very good fashion.
And Detroit turned out, and we saw a couple of elections where Detroit made a difference.
Yes. That
millage for Wayne County Community College,
yes.
That Detroit definitely made a difference in that close vote.
Right, and the proposal won for the emergency manager deal. I think Detroit came out and voted in something like 83% for the emergency manager proposal. And so where it counted, I think, is the emergency manager proposal. And like you said, that Wayne County millage, Detroit really showed up, and I was really very proud of Detroiters in terms of getting back on the political scene and weighing in on these elections. The Supreme Court, we did get 1 seat, so I think it's a 4-3 deal where we got Bridget McCormack. Right. We had hoped to get at least one of the other 2 on there, but they missed it by a slim margin, of course. And so we're headed back, and for the next 2 years, we'll be looking at, again, a Republican run across the board. But in the State House, we were able to make significant gains.
Well, let me ask you, with those gains, will it make a difference in the Republicans continuing to push their agenda? Let's talk about the conversation regarding replacement legislation in Lansing for Public Act 4. Right. They're talking about creating options for local communities instead of just implementing or appointing an emergency manager who strips the local elected officials of their power. Right. But there's a number of other discussions taking place in this lame duck session, and that they will probably may or may not get passed, but definitely will take up in the next session. Right.
So, we have lame duck, and they'll probably be trying to rush to get some things done. I think that the number mix, I think it's now a 52 to 58 versus a 47-63 in the House of Representatives in January. I think that makes some of a difference. I mean, we would have liked to win the whole thing and get Democratic control, but it makes somewhat of a difference when you don't have a vast difference in the numbers because again, each party is going to be looking at trying to maintain a majority in the next 2 years.
Would that make a difference? Would that make a difference in them just gaveling legislation through for immediate effect? I know there was a challenge in the courts. I don't know how the courts dispose of it as it relates to immediate effect. Right. That have been a tradition of allowing legislation to be gavelled through as far as immediate effect. But since there's clearly not a majority of the Republican caucus in the new legislature, will that matter?
Right. I think so to a certain degree, but again, it also depends on the personalities of the leadership as well. And so the numbers.
You're talking about the leader. Hold it. Let's talk about the leadership in the Democratic Party. Correct. Because last time Rick Hamill should have stood firm and should have pushed that button
on the immediate effect.
Correct. For Public Act 4 and others.
Right, on the Public Act 4 and others. There were a number of different pieces of legislation that came through there. The 312, which is the binding arbitration, they wanted to open that up. And we could have blocked immediate effect on a number of those things, which I was the one who presented that strategy. The Democratic leadership didn't want to implement that strategy until a very late date. They eventually did because, I continue to go to organized labor and other groups to say, put some pressure on our Democratic caucus to do this. They didn't want to do it.
Explain to our viewers what immediate effect is, briefly.
Okay. So just real quick, if you don't have a majority, normally the party that's in the majority, Republican Party, can pass a law, and the law won't take effect, though, until maybe a year and a half later. If you're the Democratic caucus or you're the minority party, even though you can't stop a law from going into effect because they have the majority vote, they need a supermajority in order for a law to go into effect immediately as soon as the governor signs it. And in this case, the Democrats could have all along, every law that came out this year or last year, they could have stopped it from going into effect immediately. In the case of the Public Act 4, although they passed it into law, it wouldn't have taken effect until maybe a year and a half later. And we would have just now been talking about an emergency manager just now if they had implemented that strategy.
Which would have forced the majority party to have to sit down with you, absolutely, if they felt there was some important legislation needed. So I'm just saying, part of being a legislator is actually understanding the legislative process, and I constantly raise that alarm that we need to start electing individuals who can think, who understand the body that they're seeking service on, and then understanding the rules of engagement. Certain things, in public office, there's certain rights that the minority have that can actually force the majority to have to work with you. And the last leadership for the Democratic Party under this current session that's about to end was woefully weak.
Right. Yeah. Well, I couldn't disagree with that. But I'll tell you, I hope that when we come back for the lame duck, they come back with a firm resolve that we're not going to let
there's new leadership.
Well, for the rest of this year, we still have the same old leadership, but they have shown a little bit more pushback now that we've gotten organized labor and some of the other Democratic interest groups to be able to weigh in and say, well, why, John Olumba and a number of other legislators are saying we should be doing this, this, and that. Why aren't you all doing that? And they've been a little bit better. Hopefully for the rest of this year, we can be able to at least give some pushback to stop some things that are going to go into the lame duck. And then start next year, I think the Democratic leadership, we did a 180-degree turnaround. We elected Tim Grimal, who's our new Democratic leader.
I like him.
Yes, Tim Grimal from the Pontiac area. He's dealt with the emergency manager in Pontiac and has been a vocal voice against it from day one, and has been a very serious activist. And number two, we've got Representative Rudy Hobbs from the Southfield area, who's also been engaged in Democratic politics across the state, and that's a total turnaround from what we've been dealing with.
Well, we got to take this break, and when we come back, we're going to be joined by Kevin Tolbert of the UAW, and we're going to talk about, get his perspective on the results of this year's election, as well as next year. That's going to be a very interesting year because these local officials in the city of Detroit are up for re-election. Welcome back to the Jonathan Kinloch Show. We just finished the conversation with State Representative John Olumba, who is one of the up-and-coming leaders in Michigan. And we're now about to have a conversation with Kevin Tolbert, who is an assistant director at the UAW. And I want to welcome you to the show. How are you, Kevin?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, you know, the UAW, a lot of folks are familiar with the positions that are down in the plants, as far as the roles that the local presidents have in collective bargaining and dealing with grievances. But there's another layer of leadership within the UAW at Solidarity House and elsewhere that actually impact workers' rights and have a role in this community. You all are very engaged in the community. We just came from an election, a general election, where the UAW and other unions played a very important role in President Obama being reelected. You, Kevin Tolbert, was a name that was out front in galvanizing and pulling together a lot of the efforts in the city of Detroit, along with Jimmy Settles and the resources that you all brought to the table and the focus that you all pushed from your labor brothers, I believe had a very important role. Now we're on the other side of the election, and there is the responsibility of the president to govern, but it's also important for the community to stay behind the president. Where is your role? Where is your role in an effort of keeping the people informed and energized around this president?
Well, one, we were extremely excited, and we felt that this was the president we had to be behind. The president was very, very, very active in saving the jobs of lots of UAW members. Definitely what he did at GM and Chrysler saved that industry, but not just for them. It definitely helped out us in Ford Motor Company. I work for Vice President Jimmy Settles. He has the Ford assignment, and there's others who have been active as well. Definitely our President Bob King has been really integral out here. But if we couldn't get behind this president, then I don't know if any president we could get behind. So we had to make sure people understood what he did, how it was only him in that room saying, let's save Chrysler. You know, and the industry couldn't stand for one of those to go down, GM or Chrysler. We were all tied together, and we understand that. So the president took historic actions. We wanted to be behind him, and it was our job to make sure the community understood that. Because a lot of times we hear the negative ads, we hear things, and we start thinking, well, things aren't that much better for me. You know, maybe I am struggling still, and I would like to make more money, and I wish that more of my family was working. And so we get things twisted. So our job, one, is to remind people what he did. Remind people from historical perspective what this president is doing for us, and keep people engaged in supporting him. This election was a chance for us to get a lot of people back to what the UAW used to do. I hear a lot of stories from Vice President Jimmy Settles talking about how the UAW was when he was younger and coming up, and hearing the way that we were active and how we were at every poll location, that people volunteered and we got out here. And it's really important for us because, you know, we just can't outspend the other side.
Absolutely.
We just don't have enough money. But we ought to have enough people power, and we have to get behind people and help them get off the couch and stop being dormant. So I'm so proud of Detroiters for what we did. Looking at the numbers that came out, being out there at the polls and seeing people wait 3 and 4 and 5 hours to vote, and you know.
But you also have the early voting satellite, not early voting, but the satellite locations that were made available. That was something that you all really pushed from my understanding in the community as far as getting people to these satellite locations. So that was something new and something that was very important.
I think those numbers are up to 80,000, and so that's a lot of people who went out and voted. And even at those places, there were some waits, and people waited, and they were really engaged. But we're excited about that because that's American as apple pie. I mean, to contribute to that process.
Speaking of apple pie, and what is something that is an integral part of this country, collective bargaining is very important. And around this country, we're seeing local legislatures that are actually taking up right to work. It's sort of an oxymoron, right to work legislation. Why is collective bargaining still important and relevant today from your perspective?
You know, people talk about the fact that, you know, collective bargaining is a thing of the past. We have all those things enshrined in law. We have seen just through the UAW, we represent all kind of workers. I currently have an assignment where I have Blue Cross Blue Shield employees, mostly white-collar workers. And so what we find is no matter the positions, whether you're working to build a vehicle or if you're working in an office environment, the issues are the same as workers. So when we see that legislatures come along and they start removing the right to have collective bargaining, like we've seen in Wisconsin and Indiana and Kentucky, we are very concerned because the collective bargaining process gives those members so much of a voice to talk about what's going on. The ads were out there on the air where you heard from police officers and teachers and the like. But, you know, it also goes a lot further than that because that is the place where you get a chance to address a lot of issues. So it doesn't matter the field. You get a chance to sit down and talk to the employer about things that the employer may not know.
Well, we're hearing that the Michigan legislature is actually possibly going to consider in the lame duck session right to work legislation. And when we come back, I want to have a conversation with both Kevin Tolbert of the UAW and Representative John Olumba as it relates to the impact of this potential legislation here in Michigan. We'll be right back here on the Jonathan Kinloch Show. Welcome back to the Jonathan Kinloch Show. Kevin Tolbert, Representative John Olumba. In the lame duck session, there's talk about the legislature actually taking up right to work bills. Representative Olumba, is this something that the legislature will seriously take up since Prop 2 failed?
Right. You know, I think there's going to be an impulse for, you know, pundits, people who are engaged politically, who comment about these things, radio show hosts, etc., to say, well, that's probably something that's far away from the horizon in the state of Michigan. And they've been saying that all year. I've been in the legislature now for a year and a half, and while right to work has not been something that they've taken up seriously thus far, you have to understand that there are members who are very serious about right to work legislation, even if the leadership may not have had an appetite for it at that moment. Going forward, and because of some of the things that I see taking place in Detroit as it pertains to Lansing, as it pertains to what the vote looked like on the Proposal 2, and some of the news, some of the ads that were put out there, some of the advertisements that were put out there, I wouldn't put anything past this governor and the legislature in terms of moving the right to work.
Kevin Tolbert, the union just came from that tough fight in trying to get Prop 2 enshrined in the state constitution. Are you all equipped and ready for a fight if the legislature and the governor bring this issue forward?
Well, and for this issue, we're always ready for the fight. This is basically the lifeblood of unions, and we had a survey that just recently came in that said 55% of the people who voted support collective bargaining. I think most people heard the vote no on everything, and because they didn't understand
that's pretty much what I thought too. A lot of folks was confused. This ballot, especially in Detroit and Wayne County and a couple other areas, it was just too loaded, and people were like no to everything and and they really didn't dissect the impact of many of these proposals.
But I'm proud of what I saw in Detroit, though, because 83% of voters voted for it in Detroit. I think in a lot of places, people looked at it and they said, you know, we already got unions and we already have collective bargaining. Why do we need to bother the Constitution? And they didn't have the educational process.
So you believe that folks did read these proposals, because we got to keep in mind, I think folks were very familiar with, because one proposal did pass, and that was the repealing of Public Act 4.
Sure.
So,
well, I'm speaking specifically in just the Detroit area. Proposal 2 passed. Now, outside of that, in Wayne County, it struggled, and outside of Southeast Michigan and other places, Proposal 2 did struggle. And I just think it took a more personal, educational instance. We need to sit down with people, and that takes a lot of time.
Yeah,
you know, you can't do that in 6-7 months.
Absolutely.
It takes time to continue to get that message for people to understand how this affects us.
Well, you know, we're going to have to do a lot of education, as you said, before we actually enter into these election cycles. Next year, there is an election for the mayor, city council, Detroit Board of Police Commissioners. Unions in Detroit, and especially in southeastern Michigan, play a very important role in local elections. The UAW is one of the unions that's out front in these local elections. How will you all play a role in the upcoming municipal elections in the city of Detroit?
Well, I mean, as what we've done in the past is that we want good candidates. I mean, I'm a Detroiter, I've been here, and I love this city, and I'm still holding on. I'm waiting for the guy that loves this city to come out and fight and do the things that we all know. Guy, gal,
right,
whoever. I want
absolutely.
someone to come in and really put their heart and soul and passion into what this city is, so that we will be behind the candidate that respect labor values, that respect the things that we care for, and really is serious and has a plan to bring this thing back. So we plan on being out here, Jonathan, the same way we were out here for this presidential election, because we have to. And that's what we're starting to do now. Now that it's over, let's educate our members on why you can't just slide back and say, okay, we elected a president, now we're done. You're not done. That same passion and energy we have to have next year.
Kevin Tolbert, you are considered a very active and engaged leader in this community. You're somebody that at least I have a lot of respect for, and I'm going to continue to invite you on to give us updates. Next year's election is very important, but there may potentially be a special election based upon the efforts of this young man over here, Representative John Olumba. That recall initiative is still moving forward. How's it going?
Oh, no, it's going very well, and I think that just kind of piggybacking on what Mr. Tolbert said here, when you talk about candidates, when you talk about politicians, it's important in terms of their vision, it's important in terms of their experience, but and when he talked about the passion, I think one of the most important things that a candidate can be or an elected official can be is to be connected with the community. And I take as my #1 duty to be connected with the district and with the city that I represent as a state representative. And the whole entire time I was campaigning this past election, and many people thought that I wasn't going to win. I was sure I was, because I was very connected. People were asking me, we understand that you're going to be elected as state representative, and we understand about what you did with the Robert Falcano thing, but what about Dave Bing? And I said, I'm going to face that when I come to it. I've been doing this recall, and 7 out of 10 people, when we're out there, are signing this recall saying, brother, we hope that we get this man out of here as quickly as possible. And so we're going to be focused on that to try to see if we can even the playing field in terms of Detroit not being stripped. Irrespective of who gets elected next year, we don't want it to be Detroit to be stripped of all the assets.
Well, what I would like for you to do is, for individuals who are interested, I know they call in on my radio program asking for contact information, and I think is important for folks to know if they're interested in joining that effort.
Yes, and we do get those calls from time to time. If you're interested in the effort, in terms of the recall effort, please call 313-600-2421. That's 313-600-2421. Or you can dial 313-744-DET1. That's 313-744-DET1. 1.
I didn't know that they still had those numbers available, you know, anything with DET or whatnot. Well, this effort is something that I guess a lot of folks are paying attention to, and I'm sure that many of the folks in Lansing and in the Coleman Young Municipal Building are looking at as well. Kevin Tolbert, UAW, thank you for coming on the show. State Representative John Olumba, thank you as well.
Thank you and God bless.
I know of no safe repository of the ultimate power of society but the people, and if we think them not enlightened enough, the remedy is not to take power from them, but to inform them by education. That's what I hope we do here each week on the Jonathan Kinloch Show, educate you and inform you on all of these issues that affect us around here. Until next week, have a great week.